The frosty wind whispered through the bare tree branches, exposing their black skeletons against the backdrop of the gray sky. Snow, like a white carpet, blanketed the ground, swallowing all sounds except the crunching beneath her feet. Lisa walked along the park alley, clutching the scarf in her hands, barely protecting her face from the harsh cold. Her heart felt like an icy fragment in her chest, and her breath escaped in clouds of white vapor. Suddenly, a dark silhouette emerged from around the corner. Lisa froze, gripping the hairpin in her hand, the only defense she had. The silhouette approached, and soon she recognized the familiar face. "A Lord Eric," she whispered, feeling fear grip her throat. "A Lady Lisa," he replied, his voice cold and rigid like ice. "You finally appeared." He stopped in front of her, his tall figure blocking her path. Lisa felt shivers run down her spine. She knew she couldn't escape. I had no choice," she barely managed to speak. I had to, he interrupted, his eyes narrowing. "You had to betray me?" "No," she exclaimed, her voice ringing with despair. "I never betrayed you, Lord Eric." "Don't lie to me, Lady Lisa," his voice grew quiet, but a dangerous edge lurked within. I know everything. You agreed to marry that pathetic prince." "That's not true," she desperately protested, tears welling up in her eyes. I couldn't refuse." "You could have if you truly loved me," he gritted through his teeth. "But you don't love me. You never loved me." He grabbed her chin, his fingers squeezing so tightly she felt pain. His eyes blazed with fury, and Lisa realized he truly believed she had betrayed him. "Let me go," she pleaded, trying to break free from his grasp. "I love you, Lord Eric. I've always loved you." But he didn't believe her. He pushed her away, and she fell into the snow. "Go," he said, his voice cold and indifferent. "I don't want to see you anymore." He turned and walked away, leaving her alone in the freezing park. Lisa clenched her fists, tears streaming down her face. Her heart shattered into 1,000 pieces, and she knew she could never mend it. Lisa sat by the window, staring at the gray sky. Her room was furnished with luxurious furniture, but she felt imprisoned in it. She was a princess, but not free. Her marriage to the prince had been decided since childhood, and she had no right to defy her parents' will. She remembered Eric, his strong hands, his fiery eyes. He was a warrior, a true man, unlike the gentle prince. She felt like she knew him her whole life, even though they had only met a few months ago. 2 weeks had passed since their encounter in the park. Lisa was immersed in wedding preparations. Heartless seamstresses fitted her with dresses, jewels pressed against her neck, but nothing could distract her from thoughts of Eric. His words, his pain, and disappointment haunted her. One night, unable to sleep any longer, Lisa decided to act. She knew Eric resided in the northern outskirts of the kingdom, where the Dragonlands lay. The dragon knights under his command were renowned for their bravery and loyalty to their leader. She packed a small bag, putting only the essentials inside along with a note for her parents. In the note, she begged for forgiveness and pleaded for them to understand that her heart belonged to another. Tears blurred her vision as she wrote, but she knew there was no other way. Under the cover of darkness, Lisa slipped out of the palace. She mounted a horse she had previously used for leisurely rides and rode north. She was scared, but the fear of being a stranger in her own life was even stronger. The journey was long and exhausting. Lisa traversed snowy forests and frozen rivers, guided only by the stars. Finally, she spotted the silhouette of a massive castle on the horizon, built from black ice. It sparkled in the sunlight like a crystalline palace, seemingly impregnable. Summoning the last of her strength, Lisa approached the gates. They were closed, with no one in sight. She knocked loudly, her heart pounding in her chest. "Open up," she shouted, her voice echoing off the walls. "It's Elizabeth. I need to see Lord Eric urgently." Minutes passed in silence, then the gates slowly began to open. Lisa saw before her a mighty warrior in black armor, his face hidden beneath a helmet. "A Lady Elizabeth?" he exclaimed in surprise. "What are you doing here?" "I need to see Lord Eric," she said, her voice trembling with cold and excitement. "It's urgent." The warrior scrutinized her carefully, then nodded. "Wait here," he said, and disappeared behind the gates. Lisa dismounted, her legs stiff from the long journey. She looked around. The castle was a true work of art, towers reaching for the sky, intricate patterns carved into the ice. But the cold beauty of this place couldn't warm her heart. Soon the warrior returned and motioned for her to follow him. They passed through several corridors, their walls shimmering with icy glow. Finally they stopped in front of massive oak doors. The warrior knocked and opened them. "A Lady Elizabeth," he announced, and Lisa entered the room. Eric was sitting behind a massive table, examining documents. He looked up and their eyes met. There was no joy on his face, only surprise and bewilderment. "Elisa," his voice was cold. "What are you doing here?" "Eric," she approached him, her heart pounding in her chest. "Give escaped." He didn't reply. The silence pressed down on Lisa like a physical weight. She saw anger turning into disappointment in Eric's eyes. "You've thrown everything away for me?" he finally spoke, his voice low and dangerous. "Do you understand what you've done?" "I couldn't do otherwise," she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "I love you, Eric. I can't marry the prince without loving him." He stood up from behind the table and approached her. His tall figure blocked the light, and she felt small and vulnerable. "Do you think it's easier here?" His voice grew quiet, but pain resonated within it. "Do you imagine what your father will do when he finds out? His wrath will be boundless." "I'm prepared to face punishment," she said, her voice trembling, but she looked him straight in the eye. "As long as I can be with you." Eric ran his hand over his face, looking weary. He remained silent for so long that Lisa began to think she had made the biggest mistake of her life. "You'll stay here," he finally said. "But not as my beloved." What do you mean?" Her heart constricted. "You're my guest," he replied coldly. "Under my protection. But nothing more." She wanted to protest, but he raised his hand, silencing her. "You'll rest," he ordered. "And then I'll decide your fate myself." He summoned a guard and instructed him to escort Lisa to the guest room. She walked silently, her dreams shattering with every step. She had come here for love, but it seemed she had only found captivity. The guest room was spacious but cold. The furniture was made of dark wood, and trophies, the heads of wild animals and fanciful swords, adorned the walls. Lisa felt like she was in a tomb. A maid brought her food and warm clothing, but Lisa couldn't eat anything. She sat on the edge of the bed, hugging her knees, and stared into the flames in the fireplace. She realized her mistake. She had barged into Eric's life without considering the consequences. He was a warrior, the commander of the Dragon Knights. His life was filled with dangers, and she didn't know if she could be his support. Suddenly the door opened, and Eric entered the room. He looked stern, his face impassive. "Elisa," he stopped in front of her. "We need to talk." She sat up on the bed, her heart starting to pound again. About what?" Her voice was low. About your future, he replied. Your father has declared you a fugitive. He demands your return. I won't go back, she said firmly. You don't have a choice, he cut in coldly. Either you return home and marry the prince or you stay here and become, he paused. Become what? She insisted. My hostage, he reluctantly said. It's the only way to protect you from your father's wrath. He explained that being his hostage didn't mean being loved. It means being under my protection, Eric continued, his voice firm but with a hint of inner conflict. But nothing more. The words hit Lisa like an icy wave. She understood his logic. He couldn't openly challenge the king, but he also didn't want to give her back. The betrothal was a compromise, risky but the only possible move. Do you understand what you're getting into? Her voice trembled. This will unleash war between the kingdoms. I'm not afraid of war, his gaze turned steely. But I don't want it. Only if there's no other way. Lisa understood he was right. She had put him and his entire kingdom at risk. She had come here for love but had only brought problems. What should I do? Her voice was quiet and desperate. He remained silent for a while, his gaze directed somewhere beyond her shoulder. It seemed he was wavering, struggling with an inner demon. There is another way, he finally spoke, his voice low and hoarse. A way that might preserve peace. He stepped closer and stopped right in front of her. His eyes, usually cold and impassive, now burned with an unfamiliar fire. You could become a dragon lady, he whispered. Lisa's heart stopped. Dragon ladies were legends, myths about women who could communicate with dragons, mighty creatures that lived in the northern lands. But how? Her voice was barely audible. It's a ritual, ancient and dangerous, he explained. If you undergo it, you'll become part of our order. You'll receive the protection of the dragons and, perhaps, their assistance. But if you fail... He didn't finish, but Lisa understood anyway. Failure meant death. She looked into his eyes, fear battling with determination. She knew it was a crazy idea, but it was the only chance to stay with him, the only chance to prevent war. I agree, she said, her voice firm despite the trembling in her body. Eric remained silent for a long time, then nodded slowly. Good, he said. Then prepare yourself. The ritual will take place at dawn tomorrow. He turned and left, leaving Lisa alone in the room. She collapsed onto the bed, her body shaking. She had made her choice, but was it the right one? She didn't know, but one thing she was sure of, she didn't regret coming. At dawn, Lisa was led to the sacred lake, located in the heart of the Dragonlands. The lake was covered with a thick layer of ice, its surface shimmering, reflecting the first rays of the sun. Next to the lake stood a stone circle on which lay ritual objects, a bowl of glacier water, an ancient parchment, and a silver dagger. The dragon knights, dressed in black attire, stood around, their faces stern and focused. Eric stood aside, his figure standing out against the snowy landscape. The old shaman, his face wrinkled like cracks in the ice, approached Lisa. He spoke in a language unknown to her, but his gestures and gaze radiated strength and wisdom. Lisa realized he was performing some sort of preparation ritual. He made several marks on her hand with cold chalk, whispered a prayer, then gave her water to drink from the glacier bowl. The water was so cold that for a moment she thought her heart would stop. Gathering herself, Lisa approached the lake. She recited the invocation written on the parchment, her voice ringing with cold and excitement. Then, at the shaman's command, she plunged the silver dagger into the ice. The ice cracked and a cloud of thick mist rose from the depths of the lake. The air became so cold that Lisa could barely breathe. Suddenly from the mist emerged the enormous head of a dragon. Its eyes like molten gold stared at her. Lisa had never seen a dragon before, but the legends were true. It was a magnificent creature, its body covered in black scales that gleamed in the sun. The dragon opened its mouth and a column of fire burst forth. Lisa screamed in fear, but the fire did not scorch her. Instead, it enveloped her body in warm glow. She felt a strange connection to the dragon, its thoughts and feelings becoming clear to her. She felt its strength, its wisdom, and its ancient sorrow. Suddenly the warmth vanished and the dragon disappeared into the mist. Lisa sank to her knees, her body weak, but her heart overflowing with joy. She had passed the trial. She had become a dragon lady. Eric approached her and helped her to her feet. His eyes, usually cold, now shone with something akin to respect. Congratulations, dragon lady," he said. "You have endured." She smiled through tears. She had done it. She would stay with him. But now her future awaited her, a future she couldn't even dream of. Several months passed. Lisa adjusted to life among the dragon knights. She trained with them, learning to wield weapons and understand the language of dragons. Her bond with the mighty creature made her stronger, more agile, and more confident. She understood that Eric couldn't openly confess his love to her, but his attitude toward her had warmed, something that hadn't been there before. They spent a lot of time together, discussing strategy, learning from each other. One day, messengers from the king arrived to Eric. They brought a letter demanding Lisa's return and an end to this foolish situation that could escalate into war. Eric convened a council of the Dragon Knights. It was the first time Lisa participated in such an important meeting. After long debates, it was decided to send Lisa with a message of peace. Her mission was dangerous. She needed to convince her father that she was happy, that she had become a dragon lady, and that she could be a bridge between the two kingdoms. With mixed feelings, Lisa set out on her journey. She was returning home, but no longer as a defenseless princess, but as a strong and confident woman, a messenger of peace from the Dragonlands. Upon seeing her, the king became furious. He didn't believe her words, considering them lies fabricated under Eric's pressure. He ordered her to be locked up in the dungeon. Days in the dungeon dragged on slowly. Lisa was losing hope. But one morning she heard noise and shouts. Opening the door, the guards let in a woman wrapped in a cloak. Under the cloak was her mother, the queen. She told Lisa that she believed her, that she had seen her changes and the strength she had gained. Together they devised a plan. The queen secretly met with the dragon envoys and arranged for negotiations. The negotiations were long and difficult. Eric and the king didn't trust each other. But Lisa became the bridge they needed. She translated not only words but also emotions, explaining the positions of each ruler. Finally, a compromise was reached. The kingdoms forged a peace treaty. Lisa remained a dragon lady but gained the right to freely visit her parents. Eric and the king agreed to cooperate and assist each other. The news of peace spread like wildfire across the land. People rejoiced that there would be no war. Lisa's parents were proud of their daughter, who became a symbol of peace and unity. Lisa understood that her love with Eric was unusual. He was a warrior and she was a bridge between worlds. But their connection with the dragon bound them together, making them stronger. They knew that ahead of them lay many joint tasks, and now they were ready to face them together. Many years passed. Lisa became a wise ruler of the Dragonlands alongside Eric. Their connection with the dragon helped them maintain peace and prosperity in both kingdoms. The tale of the princess's love for the dragon lord became a legend of the power of love that overcame all obstacles and united two worlds. Thank you for being with us today. I hope that this story has brought you emotions. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like it, subscribe to the channel and click on the bell so you don't miss any of our new stories. Thank you for your support. You are the best.